Every trader is born the moment they face their first real loss. You remember your first real loss. The one that didn't just hit your balance, it hit your belief. That moment when the green candles you trusted turned blood red, and your confidence vanished in seconds. The charts go silent, the notifications stop, and all that's left is that sick feeling in your chest, whispering, "What if I'm not made for this?" That's the birth of every real trader. Not when they first win, but when the market first punches them in the gut. Most people never recover from that moment. They blame the strategy, the setup, the indicator, anything but themselves. They reload, revenge trade, or quit entirely. But the few, the ones who later master this game, they do something completely different. They pause. They study that red, because they understand something powerful. That loss isn't punishment. It's communication. It's the market talking to you. And how you listen determines how far you'll go. You see, the market is a mirror. It reflects not your skill, but your state of mind. Every red candle reveals a weakness. Impatience, ego, hesitation. And until you face it, you'll repeat it. That's why most traders live in a loop: small wins, bigger losses, and endless emotional resets. But the elite traders, they break that loop by facing their red head on. They look at the loss and ask, "What did this teach me about me?" That question separates survivors from victims. Think about it. Your biggest loss wasn't random. It was a result of something deeper: fear of missing out, need for validation, lack of discipline. The chart was just the stage, your psychology wrote the script. Every great trader you've ever heard of, Livermore, Douglas, Tudor Jones, had a breakdown moment. A point where the market stripped away their arrogance and forced them to rebuild from humility. Because the truth is, no one becomes consistent until they've been broken by inconsistency. No one becomes patient until they've been punished for rushing. And no one learns precision until the chaos costs them something they care about. Losing is how trading carves character. It's not a setback. It's a shaping tool. The red trade is your mentor in disguise. But you only see that when you stop reacting to it emotionally. That's the hardest part, sitting with the pain instead of escaping it. Because every time you run from a loss, you also run from the lesson it carries. Every trader wants growth, but no one wants the growing pain. And yet, that pain is where your edge is born. You don't grow when you win, you grow when the market humbles you. Every red trade you survive with awareness builds your emotional armor. Every setback you study builds your mental clarity. And every failure you accept makes you less fragile, more dangerous, more precise. So next time your screen bleeds red, don't flinch. Don't curse it. Don't panic. Breathe. Look at it with curiosity instead of fear. Because that's your teacher speaking. That's the point where losers react and traders evolve. Remember this, the best traders aren't fearless. They've just learned how to stand still in the fire. They've turned loss into language and pain into perspective. The market doesn't reward perfection, it rewards emotional maturity. So when you see red, don't see it as an ending. See it as initiation. Every trader's real journey begins when they stop avoiding pain and start learning from it. Every green candle is a result, but every red one is a revelation. And in that revelation lies your rebirth as a trader. Losses don't destroy traders. Denial does. Every loss tells a story, but most traders never bother to read it. They close the chart, hide their P&L, and move on, pretending it never happened. But that's like burning a book that could have rewritten your future. Because inside every losing trade is data about your behavior. A mirror that shows you exactly why you keep repeating the same mistakes. See, the market doesn't just take your money. It exposes your mindset. Every entry, every exit, every hesitation is a reflection of what's happening inside you. That's why elite traders don't fear losses. They dissect them. They don't look at red trades emotionally. They look at them scientifically. They study what triggered the entry, what emotion drove the exit, and what pattern they ignored in between. That's how precision is built, through postmortems of imperfection. Losing reveals three things: your impulse, your bias, and your discipline level. Impulse is the urge that makes you act without logic, the itch to trade when there's no setup. Bias is the story your ego tells you to justify bad trades. And discipline, well, that's what's left when both impulse and bias try to seduce you. The truth is, every trader knows the rules, but only a few live by them when emotions strike. That's what separates the analysts from the executors. Because execution isn't about clicking buttons, it's about controlling your internal chaos. When you lose, the average trader asks, "What went wrong with the market?" But the elite trader asks, "What went wrong within me?" That's the shift. That's the anatomy of a loss. The ability to extract internal feedback from external failure. Think of your losses as an X-ray. Each red candle scans a different weakness. Maybe you lacked patience. Maybe you forced a setup. Maybe you got greedy after one win. When you review with honesty, you start connecting patterns, not on the chart, but in your behavior. You'll see that your worst trades didn't come from bad analysis. They came from emotional reaction. And here's the paradox: the better you get technically, the more dangerous you become emotionally. Because confidence without self-awareness turns into arrogance. The market doesn't punish ignorance. It punishes overconfidence. That's why the moment you think you've figured it out, the market humbles you. Losing is not random. It's feedback. Every loss whispers something specific if you're calm enough to hear it. Sometimes it says, you're too early. Sometimes it says, you're too attached. Sometimes it says, you're trading your emotions, not your edge. But if you drown it in frustration, you miss the message entirely. That's what denial does. It keeps traders blind to their behavioral patterns. They keep tweaking systems, changing indicators, jumping strategies, but never once addressing the real variable themselves. The pros know this truth. Your chart doesn't cause your loss, your character does. And every great trader has scars from the times they ignored that. The loss is never about money. It's about awareness. It's about the cost of not mastering your mind before you touch the market. You don't lose because you didn't know what to do. You lose because you couldn't do what you knew. That's the hardest pill to swallow. But once you accept that, everything changes. You stop treating trading like a prediction game and start treating it like a performance craft. You stop chasing outcomes and start mastering reactions. That's the moment you evolve from gambler to executor. Because real trading mastery is not about avoiding red. It's about extracting clarity from it. Each loss sharpens your instinct. Each review strengthens your patience. Each mistake, if studied deeply, becomes a brick in the foundation of your discipline. That's why the best traders don't have fewer losses. They just handle them differently. They log them, label them, and learn from them. They know that losing money is temporary, but losing control is fatal. They respect their red days because they know red days refine them. Imagine if every trader looked at losses this way, as tuition, not tragedy. The entire industry would transform overnight. Because once you stop seeing loss as failure, you stop fearing it. And when fear fades, execution improves. That's the paradox no one tells you. That freedom in trading doesn't come from winning, it comes from no longer being enslaved by losing. Every elite trader you admire has stood exactly where you are, staring at red, questioning themselves, tempted to quit. But they stayed. They learned to feel the sting without losing the lesson. They learned that pain is part of the precision process. And eventually, they realized that every loss they once hated became the reason they became unshakable. So when your screen bleeds red, remember this: you are not being punished, you are being prepared. The market is molding you into someone who can handle volatility, not just financially, but emotionally. You can't control red, but you can control what it means to you. And when you master that, you've already won the hardest game in trading, the one inside your own head. Pain is the tuition you pay for wisdom, but only if you stay long enough to learn the lesson. Every trader eventually reaches a point where the charts blur, the confidence cracks, and the dream feels like a lie. That's the moment you stare at your screen, watching red fill your P&L, and your heart sinks. Not because of the money, but because it feels like you failed yourself. That's the pain the market gives freely, but few survive it. Because most traders see pain as punishment. The greats see it as preparation. They understand something simple yet profound: that pain is feedback. Every loss, every drawdown, every broken plan. It's the market's way of refining your discipline. You don't build precision through comfort. You build it through discomfort repeated with awareness. You see, emotional discipline isn't a gift. It's a scar that's healed right. Every time you react emotionally to a trade, the market exposes your weakness. Maybe it's impatience. Maybe it's greed. Maybe it's the ego that whispers, "I can't be wrong." And until you face that emotion head on, it will own you. That's why the best traders don't escape their pain. They sit with it. They dissect it. They transform it into control. Because when you sit in the discomfort of a loss without reacting, something inside you changes. You realize you don't have to fight the market. You have to outgrow your reactions to it. That's the turning point. When pain becomes precision, think of it like this: every emotional outburst in trading is just an untrained response to uncertainty. The market moves and your brain triggers fight or flight. Your biology wants to act, but trading punishes reaction. It rewards restraint. That's why most people can't last, because they're emotionally wired for survival, not for precision. The elite traders retrain that wiring. They use pain as the signal to grow emotional distance from the outcome. They teach their nervous system to pause when others panic, to observe when others act. That's what emotional discipline really means. It's not about being emotionless, it's about being emotionally fluent. You still feel fear, but it doesn't control you. You still feel greed, but you don't feed it. You feel pain, but instead of quitting, you convert it into data. That's mastery. There's a reason most traders quit after a few losing streaks, because they never understood that pain is the process. The market doesn't destroy people, resistance to pain does. When you expect trading to be smooth, every rough patch feels like failure. But when you accept pain as part of precision, every loss becomes a lesson. That's the difference between surviving traders and thriving traders. Surviving traders avoid pain. Thriving traders interpret it, and once you learn to interpret pain correctly, it becomes your greatest teacher. Here's what the pros do differently. After every losing streak, they don't change strategies impulsively. They review their behavior. They don't ask, "Why did I lose money?" They ask, "What emotion was I trading? Was it fear of missing out? Was it revenge after a loss? Was it the need to prove something?" Every emotional trigger leaves fingerprints on your trades. Once you see those fingerprints, you stop blaming the market. You start debugging yourself. That's what real growth looks like. When your focus shifts from market prediction to emotional correction. Pain creates awareness. Awareness builds control, and control shapes precision. That's the cycle of transformation every elite trader goes through. But you can't skip steps. The pain must come first. It breaks the illusion of control and replaces it with the truth of process. It humbles your ego. It forces you to stop chasing perfection and start executing with discipline. It teaches you that your goal isn't to win, it's to trade perfectly according to your plan. That mindset shift is where true power begins. Every trader who's achieved mastery has a story of pain behind their discipline. The trader who blew up an account before learning risk management. The one who lost everything chasing revenge trades, only to rebuild from zero with structure and humility. The one who cried in silence but came back stronger, calmer, more methodical. These aren't failures. They're the origin stories of precision. Because without emotional breakdowns, there are no emotional breakthroughs. Pain is the architect of stability. And let's be honest, trading pain is different from any other kind of pain. It's quiet, invisible, and deeply personal. You can't explain it to friends who've never felt it. It's not just about losing money. It's about watching your confidence shatter in real time. It's about doubting your intelligence, questioning your worth, wondering if you're built for this. But that's also the exact point where the real trader is born. In that silence, in that doubt, in that raw space where you have no ego left to protect. That's when the lessons finally sink in. That's when you stop reacting and start responding. You start realizing that emotional discipline isn't about controlling the market, it's about controlling your own physiology. Your breathing, your impulses, your expectations. You learn to take a breath before every trade. You learn to pause after every loss. You learn to accept that uncertainty isn't the enemy. Your need for certainty is. You stop trying to eliminate losses and start trying to execute without emotional interference. That's when your equity curve begins to stabilize. Not because you found a holy grail strategy, but because you became the stable variable. Pain gives you the humility to respect risk. It teaches you that every trade is just one of thousands you'll take in your lifetime. It frees you from the obsession with being right. You realize that trading isn't about prediction. It's about preparation. You start saying, if this trade fails, I'm still fine, instead of, this trade must work. That small shift rewires your psychology completely. Suddenly, the losses that once crushed you become mere statistics. The red that once triggered panic now becomes part of the process. And that's when you know pain has done its job. It's reshaped your perception. The traders who rise above the rest are not the ones who avoid red. They are the ones who stopped fearing it. Because once pain no longer scares you, you've achieved the highest form of freedom in trading: emotional neutrality. You can win without euphoria, lose without despair, and execute without hesitation. That's precision. That's emotional mastery. That's what separates the few who last from the many who leave. So if you're going through a losing phase, remember this. You are in training. The market is not testing your skill, it's tempering your mindset. The pain you feel right now is not a signal to quit. It's the initiation of precision. It's the emotional tuition every great trader had to pay. And if you stay through it, if you study it, if you keep showing up, one day you'll look back and realize that pain didn't destroy you. It built the version of you that could finally trade without fear. Because in the end, It's not the wins that shape your trading career. It's the losses you refuse to run from. Pain refines, precision rewards, and between the two lies the evolution of every elite trader who ever turned red into gold. Every comeback is built on consistency, not confidence. There's a moment every trader faces, when the dust settles after the drawdown, when the anger cools, when the losses stop screaming. It's the quiet after destruction, and in that silence, something strange happens. You realize you're still here. You realize you didn't quit. And that simple realization becomes the seed of the comeback. Because every elite trader knows, recovery doesn't begin with a win, it begins with discipline. Confidence can be broken, but consistency can rebuild it. The trader who has fallen is not finished. He's just been stripped of illusion. Now comes the hard part, rebuilding not your account, but your rhythm. That's what separates the emotional from the elite. The emotional trader rushes to recover. They double down, overtrade, chase green candles to erase red pain. But the elite trader does the opposite. They slow down. They go smaller, quieter, sharper. Because they know this truth, every great comeback starts with less, not more. Less size, less noise, less ego. When your confidence is shattered, you can't rebuild it by forcing results. You rebuild it by proving consistency to yourself, one flawless trade at a time. After a big loss, the average trader's mind screams for redemption. But redemption has no place in precision. The market doesn't care about your past pain, it only rewards present control. That's why the pros never rush back after a drawdown. They step away. They breathe, they reflect. They study their equity curve not to mourn, but to measure behavior. They ask, where did I lose focus? Where did emotion replace execution? And from that brutal honesty they start designing their rebuild plan. No revenge trades, no oversized positions. Just structured, slow, methodical re-entry. Because rebuilding isn't about recovering money, it's about restoring rhythm. When you've been through real trading pain, you begin to understand something few talk about. Confidence is fragile, but consistency is muscle. The more you flex it, the stronger it gets. The first few trades after a major loss are the hardest. Your heart races, your palms sweat. Every click feels heavier than before. But that's where the discipline must speak louder than fear. You start small, micro-size, clear stop, clear plan. You trade not to make money, but to re-establish flow. You remind your mind that you can still execute perfectly. You prove to yourself that your rules still work when you follow them. And slowly, trade by trade, your emotional equilibrium returns. That's how real traders rebuild, not through hope, but through habit. Every elite trader has gone through a phase where they had to start again, where they went from chaos to calm, from reckless to deliberate. They learned that the comeback is not an explosion, it's an evolution. You don't leap from drawdown to success, you walk through the valley of patience. You lower your expectations. You focus on the process. You measure your progress not in profits, but in precision, because the market respects structure, not emotion. It doesn't care how badly you want to recover, it only responds to how well you execute. And this is the truth that changes everything. Recovery trading is the purest test of discipline. Anyone can execute when they're winning. But can you execute when you're scared? When your mind doubts your edge, when you're trading smaller than ever and your ego screams that you're playing too safe. That's the battlefield where elite traders are forged. Not in glory, but in restraint, because restraint is power. Reducing size isn't weakness, it's wisdom. The pros know that consistency compounds faster than revenge. Small, flawless trades done repeatedly create more recovery than one big gamble ever will. Let's be real, rebuilding after damage isn't glamorous. It's slow, quiet, and often lonely. You'll question yourself. You'll doubt whether you can ever trade freely again. But that's exactly what you must face. The silence between trades becomes your teacher. You start to appreciate stillness. You begin journaling every move. You analyze your emotional triggers with surgical precision. You notice when your pulse spikes before entry, when your mouse hand trembles, when you hesitate at a stop. You're no longer just trading charts. You're trading your mind. You start seeing your own psychology as part of your setup. That's when you realize recovery isn't about getting back what you lost, it's about becoming someone who never loses control again. The pros rebuild in layers. First comes awareness, understanding what broke. Then comes adjustment, changing what caused it. Then comes alignment, rebuilding the flow between your mind, your rules, and your execution. They start with smaller time in the market, focusing only on AIF setups. They cut all distractions. They limit the number of trades per day. Each trade becomes an exercise in control. The goal isn't to win, it's to execute perfectly regardless of outcome. And ironically, that's when the wins start returning naturally. Because the market rewards consistency long before it rewards confidence. True confidence, the kind that lasts, is born from repetition under control. It's not a feeling, it's evidence. When you've followed your plan 50 times in a row, when you've taken losses gracefully and never deviated from risk parameters, you don't need to feel confident. You are confident because your actions prove it. That's the quiet power of discipline born from damage. It creates a version of you that doesn't need external validation anymore. You no longer trade to recover. You trade to express mastery. There's a line every trader eventually understands. The market doesn't pay you for intensity. It pays you for consistency. The rebuild phase is where that truth becomes real. You learn that intensity is unsustainable. You can't trade angry forever. You can't chase forever. But you can be consistent forever. You can show up every day, trade small, follow your process, and compound calmness into control. That's the rhythm of the professionals. They rebuild not by regaining fire, but by mastering stillness. And when that stillness turns into rhythm, something powerful happens. Your confidence quietly returns. Not the old fragile confidence that depended on profits, but the new kind that's built on process. You no longer need to tell yourself you're back. You just are. Because your behavior proves it. Your journal is clean. Your emotions are stable. Your trades are aligned. That's when the market starts respecting you again, not because it cares, but because you finally do. The comeback isn't a single trade. It's a series of disciplined moments stacked over time. Each time you follow your plan instead of your fear, you rebuild a part of yourself. Each time you stop early instead of overtrading, you reinforce trust. Each time you accept a loss without emotional reaction, you strengthen your foundation. That's how the pros rise, slowly, deliberately, without noise. Their power lies in patience. Their comeback isn't loud, it's precise. So when you find yourself in a deep drawdown, when your confidence is gone and your account feels heavy with regret, remember this: you don't need a miracle. You need rhythm. You need patience. You need 100 small wins of discipline before one big win of profit. Because every comeback in trading, every legendary rebound, is built on one timeless principle: consistency first, confidence later. And one day, as you rebuild quietly, you'll look back at the pain that once broke you and realize it wasn't destruction, it was a reconstruction. The loss tore down your illusions so discipline could take their place. And that discipline, that calm, deliberate control, will become your edge forever. Because real confidence doesn't come from winning again. It comes from executing again. From trusting your plan, respecting your risk, and doing it flawlessly, over and over, until the market has no choice but to follow your rhythm. That's the essence of every great comeback. Not chaos, not luck, not emotion. Just pure, precise consistency reborn from damage. Your biggest losses become your greatest indicators. There comes a point in every trader's evolution when the color red no longer stings. It signals something deeper. It's no longer about the loss itself but what the loss reveals. This is the shift where amateurs see pain and professionals see patterns. When elite traders look at their red trades, they don't react with anger. They study them like scientists, tracing the emotional fingerprints that led there. The chart is no longer just a map of price. It's a reflection of their mind. Every premature entry, every greedy exit, every "I knew I shouldn't have clicked that" moment, it's all recorded in red. And that red isn't punishment. It's feedback. The difference between a losing trader and a consistently profitable one isn't just skill, it's relationship. The losing trader fights with the market. The elite trader listens to it. When they lose, they don't say, "I was wrong." They say, "I learned something." That's the quiet alchemy of mastery. The trader who once flinched at every stop loss now examines it calmly, asking, "What emotion was running me when I placed that trade? Was it fear of missing out? Was it boredom? Was it ego trying to win back what it lost?" Each red candle becomes a mirror, reflecting not the market's volatility, but their own. Over time, this feedback loop transforms the trader's psychology. You begin to notice your own behavioral cycles. How every time you feel euphoric, you overtrade. How every time you feel defeated, you shrink your risk too much. How every time you think you've figured it out, the market reminds you that you haven't. The elite trader doesn't try to suppress these patterns, they map them. They build systems around their flaws. If they're impatient, they use limit orders. If they chase moves, they automate entries. If they panic on reversals, they set alerts to step away. Every weakness becomes a parameter to be engineered around. This is where mastery begins, not in eliminating emotions, but in designing processes that account for them. That's the feedback loop of mastery: awareness, gay adjustment, go alignment. The red trade gives awareness. The reflection gives adjustment. The new rule gives alignment. And then, when the same setup appears again, they're ready. Not emotionally, but systematically. That's how red turns into edge. Because the truth is, your biggest edge isn't in predicting what the market will do next. It's in predicting what you will do next. Elite traders know themselves so deeply that they can almost anticipate their mistakes before they happen. They can feel when they're trading out of fear. They can sense when ego is creeping in. They can pause mid-trade and say, "I'm slipping into old habits." That awareness is power. It's what separates impulsive execution from intentional performance. Every losing streak they've survived has built that internal radar. Every emotional breakdown they've endured has strengthened that sensitivity. They stop needing external validation, no longer chasing the dopamine of being right. Instead, they crave internal validation, the satisfaction of knowing they followed their system perfectly. Win or lose, the loop tightens, red reveals, reflection refines, repetition reprograms. What once triggered emotional chaos now becomes a calm signal. When you see that shift, you realize the market never punished you. It was teaching you. Every stop out was a nudge toward discipline. Every drawdown was a test of structure. Every setback was a mirror held up to your psychology. You weren't trading charts. You were trading your own reflection. That's the moment trading becomes meditation. You enter trades with the same composure you used to reserve for exits. You accept uncertainty like a professional accepts discomfort. It's part of the craft. The chart stops being an opponent and becomes a teacher. And every teacher leaves you with one truth: feedback never stops. Even after years of consistency, elite traders keep journaling. They don't do it for accountability, they do it for calibration. Because they know, the moment they stop learning from red will return to remind them. That's why the feedback loop never ends. It's a living process. It keeps you humble. It keeps you sharp. It keeps you human. The trader who learns from every loss becomes unshakable. Because they no longer fear losing, they fear stagnation. They don't ask, "How do I stop losing?" They ask, "What is this loss teaching me about myself?" That question alone rewires everything. It replaces blame with curiosity, panic with perspective, frustration with focus. The feedback loop is the invisible edge, one that no algorithm or indicator can replicate. It's the quiet mastery of self-awareness built through thousands of red trades and reflections. Every time you lose, you refine. Every time you refine, you evolve. And every time you evolve, you step closer to the version of yourself that no longer trades emotionally, but intentionally. That's how elite traders turn red into gold. Not through luck, not through prediction, but through perception. Because the market will always test you, but it's your response to red that defines your edge. Red isn't the end of a trade. It's the beginning of understanding. Once you stop fearing red, you finally see the market clearly. There's a moment in every trader's evolution when the noise fades. The charts stop feeling like a battlefield and start looking like what they truly are, a mirror of probabilities. That moment happens the day you stop fearing red. Until then, fear distorts everything. It narrows your perception, blinds your logic, and chains you to hesitation. You hesitate to enter when the setup is clean. You hesitate to exit when the loss is small. You hesitate because deep down, you're not trading the market. You're trading your fear of losing. The irony. That fear doesn't protect you, it destroys you. Every elite trader knows this truth. When you fear losing, you invite it. You start managing trades, changing stops mid-position, moving targets closer, closing too early, overhedging, revenge trading, all forms of control disguised as protection. But fear doesn't protect, it distorts. It makes you see patterns that don't exist and danger where there is none. It makes your focus drift from execution to emotion. And when that happens, your edge dies. Fear of losing is like fog. It blurs the truth that the market is never out to get you. It doesn't care about your wins or losses. It's just information flowing in real time. The only real enemy is your reaction to it. That's why elite traders focus not on outcomes but on process quality. They measure success not by profit, but by precision, not by how much they win, but by how well they executed the plan. Because once you detach your identity from your trades, you free your perception. Suddenly, you see setups with clarity. You recognize when to act and when to wait. You're no longer driven by fear, you're guided by structure. This shift is profound because it changes what risk means. To amateurs, risk feels like danger. To professionals, risk feels like structure. They understand that risk isn't something to avoid, it's something to define. Every trade has risk. Every moment in the market is uncertain. But when you define it, when you accept it, you take back control. That's why elite traders manage risk not just mathematically, but emotionally. The stop-loss isn't just a price level, it's an emotional boundary. It's the line where logic ends and emotion begins. It's not there to limit loss. It's there to protect composure. Because once your emotional capital is gone, your financial capital follows. Think of it like this: beginners protect their money, professionals protect their mindset. A losing trade doesn't drain you, your reaction does. That's why mastery of risk begins with mastery of emotion. Elite traders train themselves to stay calm even in red. They breathe slower, they pause longer. They don't panic click or pray for reversals. They trust their process because they've tested it in every storm. They know that fear thrives in uncertainty, and the antidote to uncertainty is preparation. Every risk is pre-decided. Every outcome is pre-accepted. That's the key, pre-acceptance. Before they enter, they've already accepted the loss. That's why they can execute with confidence. They've already made peace with red before it even appears. And that's what separates freedom from fear. Freedom in trading doesn't come from avoiding losses. It comes from mastering your response to them. When you stop fearing red, the noise of doubt goes silent. The hesitation fades. The what-ifs die. Because you've seen enough red to know it doesn't define you. You've learned that one red candle doesn't erase your skill. It just reminds you that you're human in an uncertain game. The shift happens when you stop asking, "Will I lose?" and start asking, "Did I execute well?" That's the mindset that builds consistency. Not avoiding pain, but learning to perform through it. When elite traders lose, they don't spiral into frustration. They analyze, adapt, and move on, with the same calm they had before entering. The market becomes a rhythm, not a threat. Each trade becomes a note in a long song of probability. There's no fear, no attachment, just participation. Because once you stop fearing loss, you stop overcompensating for it. You stop chasing, forcing, and doubting. You start trading with the market, not against it. You start flowing. This shift transforms more than your P&L. It reshapes your entire psychology. Fear once made you reactive. Now awareness makes you responsive. You no longer seek control. You seek alignment. You realize that control was never about predicting the market. It was about predicting yourself. That's the true edge. The ability to stay composed in chaos. To stay objective when emotion screams. To stay present when uncertainty hits. That's mastery of risk. When you reach this level, something beautiful happens. You begin to enjoy red. Not because you like losing, but because you know it's refining you. Each loss tests your discipline, sharpens your edge, polishes your patience. It reminds you that the market is a mirror, not a monster. That every red trade is not rejection, it's reflection. And with time, you realize the truth. Trading isn't about avoiding fear, it's about working through it. Fear never disappears, it just transforms. It becomes awareness, it becomes respect, it becomes fuel. You stop running from it and you start using it as a compass. When you feel fear, you know you're growing. When you feel calm, you know you're aligned. That's how elite traders navigate the market. Not with certainty, but with acceptance. Because the moment you stop fearing red, you finally start seeing green. Not on your screen, but in your mind. The color of clarity, composure, and control. The shift from survival to mastery isn't a leap, it's a surrender. You stop fighting uncertainty and start flowing with it. You stop needing to win and start learning to stay. You stop being afraid of the market and start understanding it. That's when you've crossed the invisible line. From trader to master, from fear to freedom. The master trader doesn't avoid red, they transform it. There comes a point in a trader's evolution when the word loss stops carrying pain. It starts carrying meaning. It's no longer something to avoid or resist, it becomes something to understand. The market no longer feels like an enemy taking from you, but a teacher shaping you. Every red trade, every stop out, every drawdown becomes part of the rhythm. That's when you finally understand the art of losing. Because losing in its purest form was never about failure. It was about refinement. It was the universe chiseling away your impulsiveness, your ego, your need for control. It was carving discipline out of chaos. It was teaching you that mastery doesn't come from fighting loss, it comes from flowing with it. At first, this realization feels strange. You've spent months, maybe years, fearing the color red. You've seen it as a symbol of pain, of setback, of defeat. But now, you see it differently. You see how every great trader built their success not by avoiding red, but by learning from it. They didn't escape loss, they embraced it as part of their rhythm. Because they knew, losing isn't a step backward, it's a brushstroke forward. Every red candle that once felt like a wound now feels like a stroke of paint on the canvas of mastery. You begin to realize this entire journey was never about winning trades. It was about losing illusions. The illusion of control. The illusion of certainty. The illusion that you could conquer the market before conquering yourself. That's what makes losing beautiful. Because it forces you to confront truth. It reveals how much of your trading was emotional, how much was reactive, how much was built on hope instead of structure. And once you've faced that truth, you start trading differently. Not to win, but to perform. Not to prove, but to express. You stop being a gambler and start becoming an artist. Each trade becomes a creative act. Not because you're painting profits, but because you're sculpting precision. You treat the market like a canvas and your strategy like a brush. Every execution, every stop, every decision leaves a mark that tells a story. The red marks aren't mistakes anymore, they're contrast. They're depth. They're the shades that give meaning to your greens. That's the paradox of trading mastery. The trader who never truly loses is the one who has learned to lose completely. They've accepted that the market will always be uncertain, that red will always exist, that perfection is an illusion, and in that acceptance they find peace. They stop chasing and start aligning. They stop predicting and start responding. They stop fighting and start flowing. Their trading becomes effortless, not because it's easy but because it's integrated. Every loss, every win, every pause becomes part of one continuous process, a cycle of observation, execution, reflection, and growth. That's why elite traders look so calm, so grounded. They're not emotionless. They're emotionally fluent. They know how to feel without reacting, how to lose without breaking, how to see red without fear. You realize that true mastery was never about control. It was about surrender. The willingness to let the market teach you, to let failure refine you, to let uncertainty humble you. When you finally stop resisting loss, it transforms you. You stop needing validation from a green day. You stop measuring your worth by your profit. You start feeling grounded even on red days, because you know that every outcome, win or loss, is simply feedback. A note from the market, guiding your evolution. The master trader doesn't avoid red. They transform it. They turn it into rhythm, into structure, into patience. They see it as the heartbeat of trading itself. Because without red, there's no edge. Without failure, there's no focus. Without drawdown, there's no depth. Every red trade is simply the market whispering, sharpen here, slow down here, learn here. And when you start to hear that whisper clearly, you stop being a trader who fights the market and become one who dances with it. You start to trade with grace. You move in harmony with uncertainty. You learn when to act and when to wait, when to press and when to pause. The fear that once ruled your actions is replaced with rhythm. The chaos that once consumed you is replaced with flow. You become a student of the present, aware, patient, precise. And in that awareness you find freedom, because you're no longer trading for money. You're trading for mastery. You're no longer reacting to results. You're responding to reality. And when you reach this point, you look back and realize something profound. You were never losing trades. You were losing illusions. You were shedding everything that kept you from clarity. Your ego, your need for instant reward, your belief that the market owed you something. Every loss stripped away another layer of noise until only truth remained. The truth that success in trading isn't about being right. It's about being ready. It's about showing up every day, executing with precision, accepting uncertainty, and letting the market shape you into something unshakable. That's the art of losing, not in defeat, but in transformation. You don't just survive losses, you absorb them. You turn them into wisdom. You let them sculpt the trader you were meant to become. Because the ones who master losing are the only ones who ever truly win. They don't seek control, they seek connection. They don't fight the market, they listen to it. They don't chase green. They understand that green is simply the echo of red transformed. So when the next red candle appears, don't flinch, don't resist. Smile at it, respect it, let it speak to you. Because it's not here to hurt you, it's here to shape you. Every red trade is part of your story, part of your craft, part of the art. And if you can learn to see it that way, you've already won, not in points or dollars, but in peace. Because in the end, the real traders don't master the market, they master themselves. And once you do that, you'll realize you were never losing money, you were losing illusions. And that's the most profitable trade you'll ever make.